Right, time to start painting in the bricks. I'm going with this burnt cadmium red as a base for the bricks, but we're not going to do one colour of bricks, and that's why we're painting them individually. So we will have some darker bricks and maybe some alternative coloured bricks. But this allows me also at this stage to start painting some of the bricks that are on the base here, which is great because that means we can then start painting the earth tracking as well. There we go, that's our first brick in. And then the trick is to have as little paint loaded on your brush as possible, but enough for the paint to flow. Okay, once again, I appear to have one bristle that's longer than the rest. There we go, that's sorted. There we go, you can see the effect we're getting from that. So yeah, it is a bit of a painstaking process, and yeah, you could paint the whole thing red and then give it a wash and it'd look fine, but what I'm trying to do is tease out the maximum effects we can get just from paint on this kit. And that means doing things a little bit more focused rather than going for speed and trying to go for a really nice, natural, authentic look. I actually think now these are getting painted in that the bricks look quite far apart. But they're nice and wonky and uneven. I really like that. Well, this is the section of wall I thought was going to be the hardest to paint in, and it's ended up not being too bad. There we go. I think that looks all right. So I'm going to carry on and get the rest done, and then I'll come back to you. Well, I've finished painting the bricks. You can see we've got some scattered around. How many of those we'll see once we've got this tanks on there, I'm not sure, because the bricks are scattered in both the areas where the tanks are going to be. But the bricks are now painted in, and I think they look fabulous. I am going to do some of a slightly different colour just to break it up a little bit and make it a little bit less monotone. But yeah, I think this looks good. So that is all the blocking colours down on the walls. So by blocking colours, I mean all the base colours that I want to use. Everything else that's going to go on there is going to be paint effects, which means we can now focus on this here, and I've got to decide what my plan is with both the top and the edges. I think traditionally I do the edges black, so I'm probably going to do that again, but we'll see. And it just, by doing the edges black, it just shows it as being an intended surface and not, you know, just a slab of something cut out like a base. So yeah, okay, I'm ready to move on to the next stages with that. As soon as I've got this muddy surface down, and we can see lots of footprints and bits and pieces, so we know that it's quite a muddy surface. So that's the way we're going to go. Right then, my tanks are spray painted, although some numbskull forgot to do the turrets. I ask you. This is all now drying. It's been left a week, so this is the following weekend from the last stuff you saw. So all of this was done a week ago. So my next thing is to paint in this surface. So I need to go and choose a colour for that, and then we can get stuck on with some washes. And I can't believe I didn't paint them. What an idiot. Right, let's crack on. So I'm going with 3 earthy colours for the base, because it's clearly just a dirt path, and that's going to give me some future options around what we do with the wall and do with the tracks and the tanks and bits and pieces like that. So we're going to start by using the tan earth with a hint of chocolate for the actual base. So let's do that. Right, so tan earth is this colour, and again, I don't think I've used it before. So we'll get rid of this ring later because it's not coming off. Right, so that colour on its own, whilst being a nice base colour, is just a bit too pale for my liking. And what I want to do is set the tanks off. So you've got to think about how this is all going to look. So I want very much for the tanks to stand out. So we don't want anything that's too pale, but we also don't want it too dark, because that'll make the pale tanks look a bit stark, even though we've got to camouflage them. So I want to mix a colour, and as long as we're mixing the same paint system, that's never a problem. So I'm going to start by thinning it, and this is just tap water, it's nothing special. The ICM paints really behave nicely with a bit of water. In fact, I find they thin better with water than anything else. It doesn't matter if I overthin this a little bit, because I'm going to be adding some dark in a minute, which will add more pigment and therefore make it a bit thicker again. Right, so I'm going to go with 1 brush load, mix that in thoroughly, see what that does. You can already see that's brought that down quite a bit. That's nearly there. So just going to go with a part brush load, work that in. So I think that's the colour I'm looking for. So in my head, that's a sandy earth colour. So let's get on and start putting that down and see what it looks like. Okay, so what we're going to do is get this covered off. You could airbrush this, obviously, but because of the way I've painted it, I'm not going to. But you could mask everything off and airbrush it, and that would certainly be quicker, but where's the fun in that? So I think that's a nice contrast to the step. Therefore, it's going to make the wall stand out a little bit more, which is good. We don't want to get any on the wall ideally. We want to do that later on when we're intentionally doing that. I've just painted over a brick. So let's just sort that out quickly. So I just managed to paint over a brick, which was a silly thing to do. So I'm just going to wet the end of this little Q-tip here, and we'll take that back, and with a bit of luck it will just look like it's muddy because it's buried in the road. There we go. I've done another one as well. That's what happens when you have a YouTube channel and you're doing something and you're conscious of talking to people. There we go, recovered. Right, so we need to get it into all the dips and hollows and the raised points and give it a nice even coverage. Just paint up to, but not over, your other painted details, which is these bricks. We'll go in with a finer brush in a minute and sort those out. And I've still not decided what I'm doing with the end, but I don't want them to be the soil colour, so I'm not going to paint the sides in. So we can see this is going to take 2 coats, but that's fine. Right, I'll carry on and I'll come back to you when we're doing the second coat. Right then, all of our block colours are now down, so now we can get to the really interesting part of starting to bring this to life. My first process is actually to tie all of this together with a wash, and I'm using dark brown wash from Humbrol for this task. Now you can thin this. I find these washes a little bit on the thick side personally, so you can thin these with white spirit or Humbrol enamel thinners, because obviously it's an enamel wash. So I haven't sealed this, but because we're putting an enamel wash down, that's fine. We don't need to seal it. You can do if you like, but my preference is actually to seal it once I've got the first sort of wash down, and then I've tied everything together and I'm ready to go. Then we'll seal it with an acrylic clear coat, and that will allow us then to start going to town with more enamels. So the basic rule when you're doing any form of weathering is whatever paint you're using needs to be going on top of a different type of paint. Otherwise, when you come to use thinners and things on it, you're going to take that paint away. So There we go. So as you can see, it's quite a dark, rich, earthy colour. And what we're going to do, take some of that off the cap anyway, and some of this thick, gloopy stuff that's on the lid, and then get plenty, because all we're going to be doing is putting thinners in here. So if you've got leftovers, you can always pour it back in the jar, unless you feel you've got it really contaminated. So there we go, that'll do for now. We can always come back and add more, can't we? I've got enamel thinners to hand, just because I've been painting the turrets that I forgot. I've got enamel thinners to hand, so we'll use that in this instance. So I just put a couple of drops in. There's no science behind it. It's thin it till you've got it as thin as you want it. I think I want that a little thinner yet. So it's not like doing a panel line thinner on an aircraft where you want this to remain dark. What I'm doing is I'm tinting and tying everything in. So it's like, if you think about a black and white photograph, when you look at a black and white photograph, it's always very pleasing to the eye because everything's monochrome. It's all blended in. It's all different variations of a theme. Whereas a colour photograph can be less pleasing because it can be too busy to the eye. And what we've got at the moment is we've got a fair number of different colours. So I just want to sort of link it all together, a bit like a black and white photograph. So what we can do, different areas are going to require different brushes. So when we're doing this, we can be liberal with the brush. I don't want to be quite as liberal in some of these other areas. So different brushes for different tasks. So what size is that? 3x0. This is quite a nice brush. I use it quite a lot for my washers and things. And it was quite a cheap one. I think I got it from The Range, which is a sort of a cheap arts and homeware shop in the UK. And we're going to start on these bricks here, and we'll just paint all the bricks and down onto that plaster. And then we're going to go into, there we go, into the shutter there, making sure we've got in all the edges, and it's just going to show us all those little undulations, creases, chips, gaps. We can do the stone. And then the front plaster. Now that is clearly too thick on the front plaster. So what we're going to do is get a little bit of white spirit in another pot so we can clean up as we go. So I've now got another palette running which has just got clear white spirits in. And what I can do, I've got a small brush here so I can go in with precision and just take back what we just did. Doesn't matter if the thinners get a little bit dirty. It's going to help us. I mean, you can do streaking effects and things like that, but you can see as I trim that back, there we go, you can see how it's muckying up, giving us an uneven finish, which is what we're looking for, but it's also still settling in all the little nooks and crannies, so it adds a nice sort of dirty effect. Just unload some of that brush. So get my bristles moist again, and you can keep trimming it back till you've restored the brightness of the original plaster as much as you like. So there we go. And by keeping the edges a little bit mucky, that just shows you that life has been happening, I think. There we go. See, it's very, very simple. Nothing to be scared of. Get yourself a cheap kit like this and have a play. Honestly, it's a lot of fun as much as anything else. So we'll do that. We mustn't forget the inside areas because they will be viewable. And do our woodwork there. I'm going to be a bit more liberal on the bricks there and across that like that. Just make sure you've not missed any areas, that everything's been covered. And we'll do this area as well. So you could do streaking now at this point as well with your thinners, with your white spirit. You can cut this back any way that you like. So you could do streaks now, but I'm going to do streaks later with greys rather than browns. Okay, so I want to just clean up the woodwork a little bit. So I'm just going to go over the front edge and make that a little brighter, and same here, just picking out the tops of the louvres. So it gives your effect a bit similar to dry brushing, but it basically leaves the dirt in the background. Okay. We want to make sure that it leaves itself in that little crack in the plaster there, because that's highlighting that crack. And we perhaps take a little bit off the front surface of the stonework there. If you get any tide marks, just go in with your thinners. You've got plenty of time to do this as well. Plenty of time. There we go. I'm just taking that back to the edges, making the edges a bit darker. You can see the difference it makes. It's really easy, and you can take the whole thing off and start again doing it this way if you wanted. You don't want to go over it too many times because you will, because we didn't seal this. You can take the paint off if you keep going over it with enough determination. You sometimes find as you're doing this, you get little paint effects that you weren't expecting that look really cool, and you just leave them there. So you can see what I'm doing is I'm putting a little bit of thinners on, and to make sure I've not got too much, because it'll draw up into the bristles really quickly. So just take it back so that my brush is no more than damp. There we go. So that's looking okay. Might want to take a little bit more back. It's important that you look at it face on like when you're viewing the model, and just make sure that you've got the levels right, that you've not got bits that you want to highlight that are less well picked out than other areas that you didn't want to highlight. This is also going to act as shadow, which is basically what washes are supposed to do. There we go, that looks suitably grimy. When you compare it to that side, it looks a lot different, doesn't it? So, right, just going to go over the bricks now and try and get some of the red vibrance back. There we go, that gives you a bit more of an aged brick look. So again, when you compare that brick to that brick, you can see it's a big difference. So yeah, happy with that. So I'm going to carry on, and then on these orange bricks, just do the same. Just going to put it on, and we're going to leave that a moment just to settle in. Make sure we get right into all the cracks and crevices. Keep wanting to put this in the thinners, which I don't want to do really. Run right along that top. So you get the idea now. So I'm going to crack on and do this, and then I'll come back to you when it's done. So with my walls done, I am just going to put a bit more thinner in here, because obviously some of the thinner flashes off over time. And we're now ready to do the road section here, and I want this a little bit thinner. Like I say, they're quite thick, the Humbrol washers. There we go. And we're just going to go over the whole thing liberally like that, including the bricks. That's really bringing that to life. You can see all those footsteps and bits and pieces, the track marks. So we're just going to let the wash do its thing, settle where it wants to settle, and that'll give us a nice sort of naturally uneven look to the ground there. There we go, that is that done. And you can see how that's all now tied in. So go back to my black and white reference. Everything's got a hue to it that's similar, and it feels like it should be there. So even though we've painted lots of different colours, it all feels like it should be there, and it's all part of the same thing, if you like. So yeah, that is really good. I'm happy with that, and that's a good starting place. Not the finishing place though yet, not yet. So gonna let that dry, and while that let dry, we can have a look at camouflage on our tanks. Okay, so the paint is drying, or the wash is drying on our street, and the little puddles in all the recesses of the track. And while that's drying, we can now turn our attention to the tanks. So what we need to do is the camouflage, and the instructions are complex, to say the least. Better if you see them here in colour. What we've got is interlinked camouflage, but it's very small and it's very patchy. I mean, it's quite a delicate little bit of work that we've got to do. So I'm thinking we're going to start with the little one, see how we get on. And we've got 3 colours of camouflage on the small one. We've got the green, the brown, and black, whereas we've just got green and brown on the larger one. So you sort of have to decide how you want to tackle it, and I think I generally work with the lightest colours first, so we'll do that. But on the black and white instructions, it is very difficult to see what is what. So stripes are B, and B is light olive. So right, okay, I think we will just do this freestyle and do it the way we think, leaving big areas to be just in the yellow. So let's see how it goes along. I'm using this as the olive green, and I don't know if that's a bit bright, so I might have a look and see if I've got a better green, and then I'll come back to you. So I've decided to swap the olive green for camouflage green, which in my mind is pretty much British bronze green, I think. So we'll see how that goes down. Yeah, that's a nice green. So let's get some of that in the palette. Okay, there we go. So we're ready to rock with that. So I'm using, let's see, what is it, 10x0 short bristle brush, which should allow me to get in nice and close whilst we do this. Now I'm going to put the box in my view for reference. I'm not trying to copy it, I'm just trying to use it to give me a sort of style reference, make sure I don't go off-piste too much. So let's see how we get on. Now on the small tank, they pretty much show it with no camouflage on the wheels, so we're just really doing the body. So I'm probably going to start at the back, and we're just going to freestyle it and see where that goes. Okay. There's something quite therapeutic about brush painting, especially when you're sort of doing it freehand. Now again, I think this will be 2 coats, but that's fine. Okay, you get the idea. I'm just going to paint some camouflage in, and I'll come back to you if I've got anything important to say to you. Otherwise, I'll come back to you when this is done. Well, that's the first coat of my green down. What I want to do next is do the brown, and then we'll go back and second coat it and give me a better idea of how it looks. So I'm quite happy with it. Looks pretty good to me. And if there's anything you don't like, you just break it up with the brown. So next thing to do is do the brown, and I'm going to use the tan earth that we used before, which will link me in nicely, but we're not going to darken it this time, so it'll be that bit paler. So let's do that. Right, time to back on with the brown camouflage now. So exactly the same process as before. We can see how much lighter straight out of the bottle it is, because we darkened it up for the path. So this is going to make a nice contrast again, I think. So the same process as before, and I want to leave a good amount of the yellow, but I need to work this in and weave it in amongst the brown a little bit. So we just go with our gut feel, but this time we can't modify what we do, so a little bit more care is needed this time. So let's crack on and see how we get on. So let's just take that off for a moment. I'm going to start on this back panel here.
Here we go.
Okay, that looks all right, I think. So we just follow that through on the other side. Which means we need to then follow it through on the underside. Like so. And we've got a little bit on the top there, and that comes down the full length of that. So it's just about making sure that you're traveling in the right direction and joining up your little areas. There we go. And we'll leave the bottom bit yellow, I think. One of the things to try and do is have completely different shapes near your other camouflage. Well, I think you get the general idea. Just going to have a bit of fun with it and see where that takes us, really. Okay, camouflage paint is done and dried, and I'm happy with it. It's looking pretty good. We've got 1 or 2 things that we have to detail paint. So every time we pick a colour out, I'm doing everything that needs to be that colour. So I've got this red-brown colour, which I really like. And I've got a couple of things that need to be done in a sort of a brown. So I'm going with a light brown colour to deliver that. So we're just going to use this without any additional paint to change the tint. And we start in here with the bottom of these runners. So I'm guessing this was like a wooden strip or something to keep the tracks running smoothly. is the only thought I can come up with. I mean, they're clearly supposed to be rollers in there, but yeah, I don't know. But it is a different colour, and they want it to be brown, which implies it should be some form of wood. And that just smartens that bottom edge up. Yeah, that looks alright. I'm going to do the inside because when you look from the end on, you will see both sides. So okay, so that's what we're doing with that. Now it wants that to be the same colour, but I think we'll go with a different colour for that. I mean, it says G, which is brown, so I think I'll go with a more brown looking brown. I was thinking maybe of going with like a leather brown or something like that. But we've also got the figures, and their kit is sort of a brown colour, so I thought it'd be quite nice to pick these out as well in the same colour. So that's what I'm going to do. I think the straps that go with it are all the same colour as well. I don't really have colours for the other things, but I'm going to do, because I've only got it sort of front face on, but I'm going to do the kit bags and things in a more material looking colour, I think. So it's just the what I think are ammunition pouches on the front here. And we can follow that through on his belt as well, I think. Not using a particularly fine brush, because at this stage it's the only colour on, so it doesn't matter too much. Though you can see I am trying to do it neatly, regardless. Right, I'm going to get on with this and get the rest of that tank skids done, and then we'll have a look at what's next. On reflection, I'm not sure I'm quite as keen on the red-brown on the uniform. Anyway, we're going to do the blue-grey of the uniform now, except for the tanker, which has he has an earth-coloured. I'm guessing it's some form of leather or leatherette type material. So I'm just going to go in and put our first blocks of blue down. Sorry if you can hear some noise in the background. It's school holidays, and That means my daughter is home. Looking forward to the end of the school holidays. Be nice and quiet again. You can see at this stage we're just blocking out. We don't really need super fine brush. We just need to put not too much on the bristles and work carefully in small areas at a time. He's starting to look quite cool, isn't he? I'm going to carry on painting the figures and then I'll come back to you. Okay, all my paints have dried. We've got the wood down on the bigger tank here, and on the smaller tank we also need some black on the camouflage, and I'll try doing it with a Posca paint pen. I think that will be a more controlled way of doing it than with a small brush. I could do it with a small brush, absolutely I could, but I think this might just be quicker and a bit more efficient, and I've got to do some fine lines, and the paint pens really help with that. So yeah, we're gonna crack on with this and see how this works. Now, I'm gonna sort of follow the instructions a little bit for this. Yeah, it's sort of all over the place really. It's a bit difficult, but we're gonna start, because I've not done quite the same pattern as them. We're gonna start on this side here where the brown and the green meets, and I've actually got a bit of a yellow gap anyway. There we go, that looks quite cool. As far as I can see, they don't really take that up onto the top surfaces. It's only really visible side on, and from the front. Not really. I suppose it's a little bit visible from the back, but anyway, the top surfaces don't seem to have any on, so we'll leave that there like that. So yeah, then I want another one sort of here, and I guess we can, if we start here between the green and the brown again, and then I just want to loop up and follow the green edge, and we can see that by doing that, once again, I'm changing the shape of the camouflage. There we go. That looks quite cool, doesn't it? I'm happy with that. And then here we'll start again between the two colours. There we go. That looks pretty cool. Yeah, happy with that. And then we want something on the turret, and like I say, when you look at the instructions on the top view, there isn't really much on the turret. They seem to be thinner at the bottom and then get thicker as they go up. Okay, I'm going to carry on doing these, and then I'll come back to you when that's all done. Okay, so my black camouflage is on. That's the camouflage done on both tanks now. The larger tank doesn't have any black on. I think that looks rather cool. I'm really quite happy with that. So we've got decals to do on there. There's a little bit more detail painting on the larger tank. There's the tools and things that need painting, but I want this, the paint and pen stuff should be fairly dry, but before we can put decals on, I want to make sure it's nice and dry, and then we can clear coat it. So just going to put them to one side, and we can do the saddle brown now on the little pouches and things, because, well, it's just a little bit too light, really. And at the time I was thinking, yeah, that looks cool, and no, I'm not. Right then, so also we've got the tanker to paint. Now the tanker, when you look at the instructions, is earth tones. So for me, that's the same colour as the camouflage on the tank. So I think we will do that. Okay, time to tackle this. Now we're now painting it in the wrong order because I've changed my mind after we've painted in the base blue of the uniform. So we have to be really careful because it's easier to paint the higher parts first. No, I've already done it. So there's various straps and backpacks and things on some of these figures, and I'm going to initially paint them in buff, and it's really important. We'll start with the tanker guy here. It's really important that you've thought through the whole process of painting figures before you do that, because the colour that you use has got to be, you've got to understand how it's going to change as you do other processes on top of it. Now I know that I'm going to give all of these figures a pale brown wash, and that will darken everything down. So I'm quite happy to use fairly bright colours. If I wasn't going to give them a wash, I'd probably darken this buff down a little bit, add just a dab of brown just to give it a slightly more earthy look. But because we're going to go right over this and give it the brown wash, and I know it's going to darken, I don't feel I need to do that. So there we go. I'll bring that strap that comes through under his collar there. And then back under his arm. Okay, that'll need a second coat. Seem to have a little hair on there. I hadn't spotted that before. There you go, gone now. Right. So just to break these up a little bit, I'm going to do them all slightly different colours. So we'll do all of these that they look like bread bags or something like that. There's like a kit bag, some form of sleeping sheet, and what I imagine is a rations bag. There isn't really detailed instructions for painting these figures. What Matchbox do is they give you one colour and tell you to go with that. So the gun, for example, they tell you to paint it iron, which clearly isn't right, but yeah. Okay, so I think that goes there. Steady hand required for this. One of the reasons I'll be giving it a wash is because that will just tighten up my edges, just smarten them up a little bit. It's quite a wonderful thing, a wash. If there's one technique you learn to do on your models, it's giving them a wash. It will revolutionise the look of your models. Right, I'm going to carry on doing these ration bags that I've decided that's what they are, even though I don't really know. And I'll get back to you when they've had a second coat and we're doing the next item. Right, I've painted in the backpacks, and I chose because as you're painting and you're looking really close at the figures, I realised that the backpack and these front ammunition packs and things, they're all sort of one set of kit that are on the same straps. So I've painted them in the saddle brown, and then the sleeping sheet or whatever it is, I've done in green ochre, just so we've got a bit of variation of colour. So that all looks pretty cool. And I used the buff that we've used for the ration packs as ties for the sleeping packs. So this guy, who's sort of stood a bit like he's a guard, doesn't have any of that kit on, so he's nice and easy. So I'm going with light flesh for the skin colour. That'll get the same brown wash as the rest of it, and then the helmets need a little dab of brass. So I think we're going to do the brass next, and it is literally a little dab on the front of the helmet. So we'll use a dabbing device for the brass, which is a cocktail stick, because we just literally need a tiny amount. Oh, I forgot to say that I have painted in the helmet of the tank driver in grey-green. The instructions call for green-grey, so I'm assuming that's the same thing. So he's got goggles on, so I don't think he needs a dab of brass. We need to sort out goggles at some point. So yeah. Now I don't know if this guy should have brass buttons, but I'm sort of tempted to do any buttons I can see in brass. Anyway, so it was literally just a dab in the open paint there, and then we dab that on his helmet like so. Well, I think I am going to do the buttons brass. Sorry, I have to put it down here to steady it. So there's one there and one there. And that really brings him out then. So we've just got the gun left to do on that. And then we can, and his shoes, and then we can give him a wash. Right. So this chap, his buttons seem to be covered with a flap. So this guy is fundamentally the same figure. We've got two figures the same, pretty much. So that's him done. And then lastly, we've got this guy. And we've got more visible buttons on this chap. This guy seems to be much better in terms of definition than the other two. There we go. Right. Flesh is the next job. Now we only want a small amount of water in this. We don't want this too thin, because if it's too thin, you're going over doing several coats, and that means you've got the risk of making a mess. So I'm literally going to put my brush in that drop of water, take it out, and that's all I'm using to thin it with. And all I'm really doing is loosening the paint up a little bit. So I've got a little bit of flow, but it's not far removed from the viscosity that was in the paint pot originally. Right. Okay, have to roll my sleeves up for painting flesh. Don't know why, but I always seem to do it. Let's start with the tanker chap. Flesh tones are one of those colours, a bit like yellows and whites, that tend to be a little bit translucent. So that's why I didn't want to thin it, because you're already in a fight anyway. Right. Okay, that's his face done. Matchbox figures always seem to have really big hands. Okay, that brings him to life a little bit. Now we have to be even more careful here, because we've already got the rest of the paint down pretty much, well, certainly in the areas where we're painting. I'm going to start with the guy's hand and go underneath first, which takes it up to the strap and up to his cuff. Okay, first hand in. Thankfully his other one's in his pocket, so you only have to do one in total. Right. We'll start in the centre of the face, just so that if there's a little bit too much paint on the brush, I've not spoilt an edge or anything. I can just touch that drop of water and add a little bit of thinning to the paint locally on my brush, if I feel that that's beneficial for me. There we go. That's our French guy done, barring his gun and shoes. So I'll get the others done, and then I'll come back to you in a moment. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so. It's free, and that way you won't miss my first impressions, my tool reviews, my product reviews, and any of my builds, including wooden model kits as well as plastic. It's all free, and if you'd like to support the channel, you can hit my PayPal link in the text below. Every pound goes straight into the channel to keep the cameras rolling and to do more fun stuff for you to watch.